Good afternoon. I'm Bill Lyons, and I'm from the U.S. Department of Transportation's Research Center, the Volpe National Transportation System Center. This is good for in Cambridge, and we're here under the auspices of the Federal Highway Office of Planning. The Volpe Center supports FTA and Federal Highways Offices of Planning on a range of different activities, some of which are directly related to megaregions, research, capacity building, and sometimes oversight. And oversight is something that means something to MPOs particularly. Those are the planning reviews and certifications that happen every 4 years. Occasionally on those reviews, we end up writing up commendations as well as corrective actions. And in the case of megaregions, 4 years ago, the federal team commended the Maricopa Association of Governments in Phoenix for innovation in megaregions, and that initiated a whole cycle of research by Federal Highways with Volpe Center support. The first one of the megaregions peer exchanges was actually hosted by MAG in Phoenix last year in May, and we built that around some best practices research that we did for Federal Highways on MPO planning for megaregions. And included in that were not only the host MAG, represented by Jared over here, and SANDAG and ARC. And those were the peer experts for that meeting. And that was a very MPO-centric meeting. It was the focus, instead of on the Piedmont area, was on the Sun Corridor of Arizona, which is Tucson to Phoenix. But from that came the enthusiasm and ideas sparked by ARC and Georgia Tech, and Catherine's good work for this, which is a very, very interesting variation on that, I think really enriched by the combined public and private sector participation together. So far this has been a really, really fascinating peer exchange. The first day, just one thing I wanted to note is that tomorrow we have a breakout session, and when you receive the materials with the program this morning, there's a one-page piece there that gives you some information about tomorrow's breakout session. And that means that there are questions you might want to glance at, because you'll have the opportunity in a group with other participants to wrestle with some of these questions that we've started wrestling with today, and to come up with a group report out. So that's the only breakout session. Otherwise, we've got a mix of panels and presentations. So this is the session that's external peers. So these are peers from around the country that the planning group, and that's ARC and Federal Highways and Georgia Tech and Volpe concluded would be really great additions to the program. I should say that maybe in contrast to the Phoenix meeting last year, these are not necessarily the folks who've already gone through the best practice peer expert case study process. So a few of them, I think, were somewhat humbled by this role, and I think that we want to not have them feel that extent of pressure to stand up and be the ones that provide the expert lessons learned. But I think the best way to look at them is really fellow travelers dealing with the challenges of megaregions. So we've asked them to reflect on the role of megaregions, talk about their initiatives, things they have done in the past, what they've learned from, and some things that they might do in the future, and barriers and challenges. So I think it's very much a common exchange of ideas and knowledge. For our panelists, we have Rob Case from Hampton Roads, the Norfolk, Virginia MPO, Rob. And we have Carlos Roa from the Miami-Dade MPO, and Elisa Arias from SANDAG, the San Diego MPO. And they've got really great perspectives to add. We have presentations that each one will be given. Jeff Roisel from the New Orleans MPO was a last-minute cancellation. So we've talked Eric Zimmerman over here from NARC, National Association of Regional Councils, to offer some perspectives from the NARC perspective of members on megaregions and freight, Tomorrow we have another session, session 19, where Rich Denbo from AMPO, the Association of MPOs, back in the back of the room, will be doing similar comments on session 19. And I think with that introduction, we'll begin with Rob's presentation and slides. The format is that all three will give their presentations, so jot down any questions or comments that you have for them, and we'll cover those after Eric makes his comments, and we'll do it as a panel and audience discussion together. Thanks. Rob?
Good afternoon. As he said, I'm Rob Case from the Hampton Roads region of Virginia, and so one of the first things that I'm going to do is to introduce Hampton Roads to you if you're not familiar with it, and then get into this topic of the day. So here we have a map of the region. As you see, the East Coast here, we're right in the middle of the East Coast and on the East Coast. And so our MPO represents 13 cities and counties that surround this body of water here. This is the Atlantic Ocean, and this is the Chesapeake Bay. And right here is what is the body of water is called Hampton Roads. And so the region is named after the harbor. And you might say, well, what is roads? A road is a place where ships ride at anchor, and hence the name Hampton Roads. And so when this area needed to have a name, they decided to name it after the harbor itself. So, so just to introduce you, you can see that the water is a big part of what we do. So we have the beaches there, and the military, and waterfront destinations, and also at the lower right-hand corner there, one of the best military plane museums in the world, privately funded. So, okay, I'm triggering. Here we go. We are the 37th largest MSA. It puts us on par with Nashville, which we discussed earlier, and Indianapolis. And we're going to hear from San Diego in a second. So one thing that sets us apart is these two regions are the two largest concentration of armed forces in America, much higher than any of the rest. And third largest port on the East Coast. We've already mentioned New York, New Jersey, Savannah, Charleston, and then some lesser ones there. So that gives us our three key industries. I think Atlanta mentioned 6, all related to the water: tourism, ports, and defense. And so when we developed our tool to objectively quantify the impact of different projects, transportation projects that we were considering, we included the help of these three industries in that scoring system. So it's not necessarily the heart of the scoring system, but it is included in there. So we consider all the things that you would consider: congestion relief, economic development. But if these projects can help any of these three industries, then they get extra points and therefore get into our long-range plan. So now into the heart of the presentation, just a little bit about freight and megaregions, which, as you said, Bill, is really somewhat of a new concept to me, and so I feel like I learned through just preparing this presentation. So I hope you'll learn something as much as I did. So Bill mentioned that he wanted us to talk about partnerships, and we're proud of our partnerships that we've developed. And this is some of the key freight partners. Of course, the Port Authority is not only a partner, but they're a voting member of our board. And then we have created, as many places have, a technical advisory committee for freight, and that's comprised largely of industry people like you had brought here today, and both people that need shipments like Home Depot and those who do the shipping. So we have that sort of thing in Hampton Roads. And so here we are. This is one of the megaregion maps. I understand there's several different ones, but according to this, we are on the tail end of the northeast megaregion. But you can see that we're also close to this Piedmont megaregion that you are sitting in right now. So, in fact, if you look at this dot map of some of our trading partners, these are truck movements, but you can see there we are in red, and here are the other end of the trip. And you can see that, of course, we are dealing with the Northeast, but we're also dealing with this Piedmont megaregion that's shown here. So we're really trading with both. So when it goes to the ports, then we compete with the other ports that serve those two megaregions. So we compete with New York and with Savannah and with Charleston. And speaking of which, I will say that we have no bridges between us and the ocean, and we have one of the deepest harbors in America. We're already ready for the post-Panamax ships. But interestingly enough, before I prepared this presentation, I didn't think of New York as a competitor for the port. And I think one reason was because it just is so big. It's so much bigger than we are. So when my team did a study recently looking at freight and port shipments, we used Savannah and Charleston as our competitors to look at because they're closer to us in size. But when you look at what happened after Superstorm Sandy, you can see that we are in fact competing with New York. There was a drop, not surprisingly, in the shipments through that port of New York, New Jersey, and a likewise rise in our shipments in Hampton Roads. And so if you look at the 11 months prior in green to the storm and the 11 months after the storm in purple, you can see a slight but significant decrease in their throughput and a similar sized increase in ours, which of course if you know if you're a human being, you understand that these are complex situations and not necessarily attributable to one factor, but it does seem reasonable to that there was this shift of traffic from one to the other. So my takeaway from that, and then I'm going to do two other takeaways in this presentation, but is that size is not a good way to identify competitors. So like I said, we're competing with New York even though they're much bigger than we are. I think somebody else, I can't remember if it's the Nashville presentation, was showing similar sized regions, and our economists do some of that in Hampton Roads, but I'm not sure that makes sense. I don't think, you compete with people who are serving the same markets. I don't think you compete with people that are simply the same size as you are. And one's megaregion is not necessarily one's market area. So like I said, we're serving two megaregions, even though we technically only lie in one of those. So those are my takeaways for that section. Then the second of my three sections, I'm going to look at passenger rail, and I realize that's not freight, but it is related to megaregions, and so I'm going to discuss that. First, looking at our partners, we're proud of the partnerships that we've formed. we have, as shown above here, a passenger rail task force, which includes the elected officials from some of the elected officials from our board, and a host of others that I won't list, but the railroad companies that you mentioned today, I think some of them are here. We're served by both CSX and Norfolk Southern. And they are on this passenger rail task force. And then, of course, the state is a big partner. And since we're both doing planning of passenger rail, we at the MPO have to do a lot of coordinating between the state and our consultant so that, I don't know, toes don't get stepped on and that sort of thing. So here's an example of some of our consultants' work. In phase one, I noticed that here we are down here, and here's your Northeast megaregion, New York, up here. And so he's looking at how to connect us by passenger rail to this Northeast megaregion, as it turns out, with no mention of the Piedmont region right here, which is also important to us. But to his credit, in his part B of his study, he did look at both megaregions and the southern. Here we are, Atlanta right here, Washington, D.C. here, and then I'm located over here. So he was looking at both megaregions and how we would be connected to them. And in fact, in his study, he included this map of the megaregions. And I think somebody mentioned earlier that the FRA has bought into this concept of megaregions, and maybe that's where he got it. I'm not sure, but so he's on top of it now. No thanks to me, by the way. He did that himself. So my takeaway from that little look at passenger rail is that one's megaregion does not necessarily contain all the important, what I'm calling extra-regional OD nodes. And I challenge anyone in this room to come up with a better word for that, because that's a mouthful. And you would think that in our industry, whether it's private or public, we would have a word for the other end of the trip. You know, whether you're in Atlanta, and you remember, I guess they put the Atlanta map up, and he had Charlotte, and he had Birmingham, and he had, you know, these spokes, same sort of thing in Nashville. What do you call the other end of those spokes? I don't have a word for it. So I called it extra-regional OD nodes, but you know, nobody knows what that means. So anyway, I'd like for you to challenge you to come up with a word for that, and then I'd like to use it. So finally, highway access to these mega regions. Let's look at that, because a lot of the freight moves on highways. Again, our highway planning partners, we're proud of that. We have actual General Assembly in Virginia. It's called the General Assembly, the state government, and the legislators. And they are on, 3 or 4 of them are on our board, and they're voting members. And that has been very, very helpful, particularly with new legislation for new funding. And interestingly enough, I'll just say a little story about that. They recently passed new regional funding for transportation, and then my board went to distribute that money, and the legislators stood up and said, no, we didn't intend for you to use it that way. We intended for you to use it this way. And so that was a very interesting moment. Anyway, when you start talking about freight, we're also proud of the military liaisons that we have, and I see one in the audience here. But they sit on our board. They don't vote. They can't vote based on, you know, DOD regulations. But CTB is the board that oversees our DOT, and they also sit. 3 of them also sit on our board and report every month on what's going on in the state capitol with the DOT. And then, of course, we have a Citizens Advisory Committee, and I mentioned this because of this Raleigh-Norfolk Highway that I'm going to mention later. This retired Admiral sat on the board or sat on the committee, and he was an advocate for this linkage that I'm going to show you. So, of course, mega planning is not something new in a lot of places in the country. And 50 years ago, in our region, was constructed this Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, which I think was the longest bridge in the world when it was built. It's 22 miles long. And so what it did was it provided an alternative to the 95 corridor down like this. And so it was thought that it might be very useful. And it has been a good thing, but there were times when they struggled to make the bond payments because it didn't turn out, they had a hard time competing with this. And I think the reason was that the connections north and south were not that great. And so, in fact, you go 50 years in advance, and the only portion of it that is limited access is this small portion right here to the north, which is shown and blown up here. But the rest of this, north of us, see, we're right here, the rest of it is signalized, and more signals every year. It's lower. So to the south of us, this was, so here we are, and we're looking to the south to this megaregion here, the Piedmont megaregion, and there's been proposed this better connection there. And so the one thing that I was going to say, if you can back up 1 second, and then I will quickly end, but that to continue this toll road all the way down would cut 1 full hour off of the trip between us to Philadelphia. So whereas it's 5 hours now, it'd be a 4-hour trip, and that's a big difference. Likewise, this new connection would cut a half an hour off the trip to Raleigh. So somebody else was talking about looking beyond state boundaries. Here's a state map of their corridors of significance. And you notice not only does it not continue beyond the boundary, we don't even know what states lie out here, right? But if you'll see, almost all of these corridors, the reason that they're important is because this one connects this, up here, and this one connects out here, and this one connects out. I mean, they all pretty much run off the edge of the map, but we don't know what lies there. And so they're trying to get this Raleigh highway added here, but you would never think to add it because you don't even know that Raleigh's down there. So I'll pick on the DOT a little bit, but my takeaway from that is that megaregion thinking can help us identify these opportunities to provide these linkages directly north and south when we're often just focused on what's near us, which is Richmond and Washington. But if we can think megally, we can think about these other connections. So that's what I got.
Thank you, Rob. Again, we're holding questions until the end, and dispensing with long intros because your program guide has wonderful summaries of people's background for all the speakers.
Good afternoon. My name is Carlos Roa, and I represent the Miami-Dade County area in Miami, Florida. And I'm here to give you a contrast pretty much on what we've been doing in the Florida mega region, how we got there, and why it's important. This is what I pretended to cover, but I'm just going to go ahead to this. I wanted to tell you, though, that you may not have Florida as a mega region on your radar screen, but we have global aspirations. And I want you to know that it is on top of the agenda from at the state level from Governor Scott, and then the local level that I represent from Mayor Jimenez. So I think we are someone that you need to watch for in the future. Now, when Bill told me to use the mega regions map, I looked at it, it's on the top corner, and it sort of presents Florida like thumbs down. So I give it a little twist and tilt it like 35 degrees, and then now it looks like a hand that says freight business this way. So that just tells you kind of like, I am now speaking for the region that I represent within the mega region of Florida. So this encompasses mainly 3 counties out of the 2010 census: Miami-Dade, the one in 2 North Broward and Palm Beach. Now we just completed a HUD study that encompasses 7, and that was the hand that I just showed you. Now, we're the 6th largest cargo area. We have been growing faster than the United States. We are the 3rd best region to do business with, and that's at a national level. We are the 6th largest metro area with 5.8 million people. Regionally, you know, we represent diversity. If this is what the United States will be in 25 years, we're that now. We speak multiple languages. Again, on the right-hand side just tells you that traditionally we'll be engaged with Latin America and the Caribbean. That's been a natural north-south commerce, but we have global aspirations, and we are one of those ports that are dredging for the post-Panamax. We'll be ready for business January 2015. So we have 6 mega projects. I'll tell you later what they are. So we're counting on that. The world's changing. I know that I've heard many presenters here saying we weren't ready for certain things. We think we planned for what we planned, and we're going to have to wing it if it doesn't come the way that we thought, but several investments had happened. Now, I just want to tell you we're the first cargo airport in the nation. We have the number 14th and 16th seaports in the United States also. We have traditionally done business with Latin America, but we also see emerging economies in Africa and the Caribbean. So I just want to point to you to the bottom right. Just think of us like New York City in the 19th century with a lot of people coming through Ellis Island. It's just the same, just with palm trees. So that's what we think we are. Again, here is just to tell you, Florida has 19 million people. It has 14 public seaports, 13 international airports, and after Alaska, we have the longest coastline in the United States with 8,500 miles. Now, let me tell you what the Florida mega region has done inside for the mega region within the state. So we define, the state, DOT, defined a total of 9 regions within Florida, both urban and rural, to be connected through economic relationships and infrastructures. Now, there are 4 major economies, you can see them. The red square, the red rectangle right there, depicts the area that I'm representing, Southeast Florida, that leads the Florida mega region. Now, at the regional level, just wanted to show you our grid. We have 3 deep water seaports, Class 1A railroads. You heard the 3 airports. We have a lot of infrastructure right now, but there's a lot planned. And again, connection between the regions and the state plan for putting it all together is happening right now. I want to highlight again the motivation. We are interested in becoming a global hub. We want to connect to you all, but also connect to the world. Miami is set to become a global city. It is, I'm just repeating our aspirations of our mayor. We will, with all these investments, will capture eastward trade. We think Africa is coming. We believe the Caribbean is there. We want to move from just trade, from tourism and services, to trade and investments, to investments in manufacturing and high tech. We don't want to just send a lot of cargo up here and everything comes back empty. We actually want to have an added value to what we do. Right now, I'm saying Port Everglades is planned to have also a deepening of 50 feet along with Jacksonville. Miami-Dade will be ready in 2015, and the picture shown is the actual aerial of Port Tunnel linking the cargo area of the Miami Seaport with the mainland downtown Miami. Now, here is, and Bill had asked me, and I want to tell you, Miami-Dade has been planning for trade since 1996. We've been the first plan in the state was done in 1996. we started working as a region since the late 80s, and this is why. There was a winery in 995 back in 1988, 1999, and then as a mitigation for that expansion, we thought of a commuter rail, and it was called Tri-Rail, South Florida Commuter Rail System, and that went on. That is still operating, so that is one of our commuter rails. We did ITS planning, and this is the sun guide. That was very important to us because we actually work with the ITS national architecture, so it was good to see what the universe looked like when you only have a little parts of it and what you are aspiring when you have the whole. That was good. It's not there, but we also did air quality conformity and termination as an airshed with the same pre-counties, but that came with money at the time, so that was very good. So incentives, that's what I'm saying, incentivizing with funding, it's always good in our experience. We established a forum for actually dealing with decision-making at the regional level in 2005, the Southeast Florida Transportation Council. And now we did have our first freight plant regional of the region, and now we're in the process of updating that to the newest one. Now, I said we did our first freight plant state in 1996. Someone asked before, do you have industry advising the MPO? Yes, we do have since 2002. We have a freight advisory committee that actually advises our board. It doesn't advise us, it can go directly to our board. So, and that is composed of the industry. We also had partnered with Broward and Palm Beach, which are the other two counties, and we are they're currently ongoing statewide and regional and county-wide freight plans. And I know, Dr. Ross, I heard this morning a lot of redundancy, but redundancy, unfortunately, a lot of times where you're a newcomer to this business, has to do with what are your best opportunities to secure funding. So that's what that is anyway. Now, here's just a list of everything we've done. I mean, the chamber, obviously, it's number 2. The Florida Chamber has developed 6 pillars, which is probably permeated every long-range transportation plan goals and objectives in the state. It's present in any planning that the state is heading right now. The Chamber of Miami-Dade, obviously, is very well connected. There's quite a few trade missions going on worldwide. Just early this year, we secured a direct flight Shanghai-Miami, which is, telling of what I'm saying. Now, here's an illustration of some of the things going on. That's the Port of Miami. There's a tunnel going on right there connecting to the building areas that's downtown. The Miami River is a working river, so it's actually a statewide hub for state intermodal systems. The lower left, the bottom 3 pictures show progress on the tunnel. There's 2 tunnels, each one in each direction. One is already completed. The other one is in the process. Here is the before and after of the interchange. Miami Airport is to the left of the picture. You don't see it. There's a Miami Intermodal Center being built. It's a multi-billion-dollar facility. Rail, and it was highlighted here, has not really been present in a lot of the freight transportation in the state of Florida, but is very present right now when there's a lot of P3s, private sector investment, to complement it. The middle lower picture is the Sun Guide Center, is all ITS. It is a regional ITS center. It is how real-time information for travelers is disseminated. And the rendering to the lower right is an actual exclusive viaduct for trucks, and it's called the 25th Street Viaduct. It connects cargo from the airport. Remember, Miami is the #1 cargo airport in the nation, with the warehousing district to the west. So in closing, we are to believe that geography is destiny, as Napoleon said. We believe that we are destined to be the center of the Americas. So thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you, Carlos. And our next speaker is Elisa from Sandag. And as a note, we'll hear from Elisa again tomorrow when she's presenting a case study on Sandag's work on cross-border crossings.
Perfect. Well, good afternoon. And first, I wanted to thank the organizers of this peer exchange for inviting Sandag to share our work on mega regions. So I'll start with the Southern California mega region. And we saw today from Catherine's new map that now is the California mega region. So we'll be rethinking our approach. But what is different about the Southern California mega region? Basically, the strength and the economic concentration. This region that spans from Los Angeles and San Bernardino County to the north to San Diego and Imperial County to the south, bordering with Mexico, is within the top 15 largest economies in the world. We host the nation's largest trade gateway with the ports of Long Beach and LA. We're talking trillions now. When I wrote that 1,100 billion, okay, we're talking trillions of dollars now. And more than half of the total California GDP and over 7% of the nation's GDP. This is data from the Texas Transportation Institute, and as you can see here, the projections are that travel is going to continue to outpace population growth, and truck travel in particular. There's a lot of congestion in Southern California since the 80s. There's been annually about $14 billion in economic losses due to fuel consumption, due to hours spent just sitting in traffic. So there's definitely a need to think in this mega regional approach. Here's a little bit of the port, seaport, and border locations. And there are about 93 airports, 13 of the commercial airports in the Southern California mega region, the largest port complex with LA and Long Beach, and two smaller ports, San Diego and Port Hueneme. And in terms of the border crossings, there is 5 large border crossings that connect the San Diego and Imperial counties, the California border with Mexico. The San Isidro border crossing, which is the westernmost border crossing, processes daily as many people as Los Angeles International Airport. It's the largest passenger crossing along the US-Mexico border, some people say, in the world. And about 50,000 cars every day cross back and forth between San Diego and Tijuana, and about 25,000 pedestrians. So what's unique about the San Diego region and California? The state has a fairly long history of regional planning, and in 1997, a Senate bill basically provided 75% of the state transportation dollars to be managed by the Metropolitan Planning organizations. The Department of Transportation, Caltrans, this keeps about 25% of the state dollars. The San Diego region is a one-county region, and we wear many hats. We have designations by the state as a consolidated agency. We're the Council of Governments. We're the Regional Transportation Planning Agency and allocate funding, and we're the federally designated Metropolitan Planning Organization. So this gives us a lot of flexibility. We are able to make decisions with all our members sitting at our boardroom. And California also has a unique aspect, is that about 80% of the population in California are paying special taxes to invest in transportation. This slide needs to be updated now. There are actually 20 counties that have special sales taxes, and this allows us to match those local sales tax dollars with federal and state dollars. And this brings $3 to $4 billion in transportation investments every year to the state. In terms of goods movement planning, the state floated a bond measure in 2008 that provided $2 billion towards freight infrastructure to serve the 4 main gateways: the San Francisco Bay Area, the Central Valley region, the Los Angeles Inland Empire region, and the San Diego border region. And the San Diego region is using part of those dollars to help finance a new land border crossing. We also participate in the Department of Transportation statewide coordination through the Goods Movement Action Plan. We participate in a Southern California multi-county Goods Movement Action Plan. Sandag has its own regional Goods Movement Action Program through the regional planning process also. So we go from the planning to the actual implementation. So the San Diego region hosts about 3.1 million people, expected to grow by another million people by 2050. And most of the population lives in the western third by the coast. And you can see here our surrounding counties that make up also the partnerships that, with which we plan for our regional plan, including the Republic of Mexico. So our board of directors, I mentioned, we're about 18. We are 18 cities and the county of San Diego. Our board is either mayors, council members, or the board supervisor members that they're appointed by their own bodies. The board meets twice a month. And in addition to the more traditional MPO functions and responsibilities about this regional decision-making, consensus building, strategic planning, we also plan, engineer, and build public transit. So we are one of the few MPOs that actually implements projects. To make this truly a regional forum, we also have representation from Imperial County, which is one of our neighboring counties and part of the Southern California mega region. Obviously, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Defense, as Rob mentioned, a big military presence in San Diego, the Port District, the Water Authority, the 2 transit districts, and also a particular or uniqueness of the San Diego region is that we have 18 tribal governments in the region. We're the county with the largest number of tribal governments, and they are represented on our board as advisory members, and also the Republic of Mexico. So in terms of our, in addition to the board of directors, we have 5 policy committees. As I mentioned, the Republic of Mexico is an advisory member to our board. We have a borders committee that basically looks at a policy on a binational, interregional perspective, and also with the tribal governments. And we have advisory, actually working groups, and one of those working groups advises the borders committee on binational matters. And we also have an interregional perspective and a tribal perspective, all under the purview of this borders committee. And as you can see, we say borders in plural. It's not just the border with Mexico, but the borders with our adjoining counties. So why is the border so important to the San Diego region and to the Southern California mega region? There are heavy delays at the border crossings between California and Mexico. And SANDAG and the Department of Transportation conducted a study a few years ago that looked at quantifying the impact of those delays at the border. Anecdotally, we all knew that they were important, but we had never put a number to that situation. And looking at, we did surveys at the border of pedestrians, passenger vehicles, we interviewed industry, and we projected about $7.2 billion is lost by both countries, the US and Mexico, annually, foregone output due to delays at the border. Most regions like to host Super Bowls, and San Diego is no different. And we're also looking at building a new football stadium. But if you look at these numbers, this is basically the economic impact of 18 Super Bowls every year. And also, well, I just went by too fast, but it's also representing the size of 4 Google companies in terms of the job losses due to delays at the border. In addition to the work that SANDAG and the other partners are doing in terms of mega region planning, there's also an effort called Cali Baja that is being led by the San Diego Regional Economic Development Corporation in partnership with Imperial Valley Economic Development Corporation and partners in Tijuana, Mexicali, and Ensenada to market this binational region together. And this is, if we're looking at this map, we're talking about 6.5 million people. If you consider Baja California, San Diego, and Imperial, it's about 6.5 million people in this area. And part of what's being marketed are these key industrial clusters. And as you can see, the top part of the slide shows us the clusters in Mexico, and in the bottom, the clusters in the US. And here we're talking again, San Diego, Imperial, counties, and Tijuana, Baja California area. And as you can see, there are some complementarities in terms of aerospace, electronic, advanced manufacturing, clean tech. So these are the types of companies that we're hosting in our region. And they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. So this is a typical day at the largest commercial crossing between California and Mexico. And this is just a preview of what I'll be talking about tomorrow during the case study. But what you're looking at there are the trucks lining up in Mexico, waiting to cross the border into the U.S. inspection facilities. This is a border crossing that accommodates 1.5 million trucks every year in both directions, and $35 billion in trade. And if the word is, the takeaway from the morning was consistency, reliability, you can imagine that this border crossing does not provide that. And that's part of the solution that we're looking for, planning for an additional border crossing. So all this mega region and freight planning happens in the context of the more traditional role of the Metropolitan organization, which is regional planning, and every 4 years, as you all are aware, we update our regional plan. The last plan that was adopted in 2011 had a unique characteristic which is shared by all the California MPOs. There was legislation passed in 2008 that required that a new element be included in the regional plans, which is a sustainable community strategy. And basically here we're looking at, in addition to the land use, transportation, housing integration, looking at how the plan can demonstrate that it meets greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets for passenger vehicles and light trucks. It hasn't gotten into freight yet, but basically the California Resources Board, the state agency regulating air quality, has set targets of emissions reductions for the different regional MPOs that we have to meet in the preparation of our regional transportation plan. And just to close a little bit on how the funding is working currently, as I mentioned, the self-help situation brings local sales tax dollars. With the additional local dollars, we're about financing about 60% of the regional transportation needs, with 40% coming from the federal and state governments. This pie chart was completely flipped a few decades ago, with most of the transportation investments coming from the federal and state government. And the region plans for about $214 billion in investments in transportation through 2050, which is the horizon year for our plan. So this concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer questions with the panel. Thanks.
Very much for the three excellent presentations, and I'd like to invite Eric Zimmerman from NARC to come up and join us. And I think it's very nice for Eric to join us. I think grab a seat, and I think Eric, this is your third week.
It is indeed.
Third week on the job. So way to put yourself on the hot seat here. So we appreciate that. And what I asked Eric to do is offer some whatever types of comments he'd like to make from the perspective of NARC, maybe NARC's membership, because it's MPOs, but as well also regional councils.
Right. Obviously, I'm the transportation director, so the folks I represent are mostly the MPOs. But we also represent a number of regional councils across the country with a fairly extensive membership and obviously unique. So I appreciate being here. This is the first time they've let me out of Washington to represent the organization, so I hope I do them proud. And the conversations here and earlier, and certainly with the folks, the business folks, gave me good food for thought. And I think from an organizational standpoint, we believe that to the extent that that the concept and the pursuit of mega regions helps MPOs do their jobs better, they have a real, they could have a real important role to play. And there's several ways I can envision that occurring. First, the ability to better tell the public of the need to invest in transportation and infrastructure, both from the business perspective. It really brings in that voice, I think, in a very strong way, especially the conversation about trade is very important. And, you know, so much of the conversation is about convincing folks that this is a wise way to invest. Certainly talked about quite a bit in DC. I'm sure it's a prime consideration for you all as well. And it strikes me that megaregions may be a unique way to help foster that conversation, especially given that part of the tie-in is sort of cultural, it's geographical. So maybe more than a national story, it's better told on the regional level or the local level. To the extent that it helps us better identify how to invest, what the needs and challenges are, and then where we're going to spend our dollars. And related to that, of course, as we move toward highlighting performance in a public that is demanding that performance be considered, that how we spend our dollars are related to what the results are at the end of the day. Those results may be better at a more regional or mega regional scale than simply at a local scale. So to that extent, this could definitely help MPOs do their job better, I think. And finally, to the extent that it helps both exhibit and expand the potential and influence of MPOs, tells their stories better, tells better what they can do and what they accomplish. I think the sort of collective notion, I think, could work very well. So from our standpoint, I think the biggest thing that we will push for in this regard, at the congressional level at least, is flexibility, is funding, and is flexible funding. So we need flexibility, obviously, across modes. We need flexibility between jurisdictions to sort of allow this to occur. The funding is always welcome, and then flexible funding that would allow this type of cross-jurisdictional planning and decision-making to occur is obviously extremely important. So I think those are the items, though. Quite similar probably to what we would push for on a number of issues, but I think in this case will be very important. So.
Thank you very much, Eric. And I'd like to open the floor up to questions from audience and participants. Feel free to direct them to individual panelists or to the panel in general. Yes, please.
Sorry, Superstorm Sandy was mentioned in your presentation as kind of, port traffic diverted from the New York area. Got, 3 coastal areas represented. I know Federal Highway has done some piloting on climate change, resiliency, and adaptation strategies as that relates to infrastructure. It seems like that would be a natural issue fit for a mega-regional approach. Of just wondering what y'all are doing in terms of planning for adaptation.
I can start. We are doing some planning at the project level, looking at sea level rise studies. We have Interstate 5 is our main north-south corridor connecting from Mexico to Canada, and we are basically looking at improvements to that road, basically by adding managed lanes, express lanes for carpools and for transit. And as we continue to do that work of design, we're definitely looking at the potential for sea level rise and how to accommodate those bridges that are going to be rebuilt to look into that area. The Port of San Diego is also doing studies on sea level rise. And at the policy level, we're basically at the stage monitoring the research that is being done by the state and also through the National Academy of Sciences and the federal agencies.
Competition. So now that some of us on the East Coast are getting ready to deepen some of our ports, you still think you're going to get all that traffic and cargo coming your way? We might want to nip into that a bit. What do you think? You all plan on having the same level of commodities and goods flowing now that we're becoming more competitive, hopefully on the East Coast?
I would say the Port of LA and Long Beach are ready for the cargo.
Good answer.
I just want to say, in the county, Miami-Dade County started in 2009, passed a green print for sustainability. But right now we're going as a region on a grant from HUD on a resilience and sustainability plan that incorporates pretty much the experiences that we have with evacuation for catastrophes and hurricanes and stuff like that. We have a grid identified. We have obviously very well prepared for hurricanes, and so for years, not just the county, but the whole state, I think. So we already have some materials, but this is actually an actual regional plan. So the results are forthcoming maybe next year, but I think it is not an overlooked issue down there.
Yeah, and Bill, I would just add to that, that the first step that we've taken is to take a military network that we had already developed, a network of highways important to the military presence in our region. And then we looked at a sea level rise scenario with an addition, like a 1.5 foot sea level rise with a 3-foot storm surge on top of it, and to see what that would do to that network. That's the first step that we've taken.
I just wanted to mention a couple things on the resilience topic. One is a plug for a session at TRB in Washington in January that is on MPO planning for resilience, and we'll have MTC San Francisco MPO, Rob's colleagues from Hampton Roads, and NIMTIC, New York City MPO, talking about post-Sandy multi-MPO jurisdictional planning. And then tomorrow we have session 19, which is called Diverse Goals and MPOs, and we will be trying to relate priority goals of MPOs in combination, not separate, to freight planning. And I think we originally were going to have a focus on resilience, but I think we're ending up focusing on livability and health. But that is the issue of MPOs never having the luxury of pursuing one goal at a time. If you've got a freight goal, you also have, let's say in the case of Atlanta, a livability goal, or in the case of Nashville, that we heard earlier, a very prominent health goal. So how do you pursue those at the same time you're pursuing a freight goal will be a topic for the session 19. Okay, another question. John?
Rob, the state or the Commonwealth of Virginia just recently went through some very interesting funding reform at the state level. Could you talk through just high-level executive summary, what that is and how you think that might impact you?
Okay. I think the first thing is that we, for the first time, have some regional money, which I think is somewhat like she was talking about in California. And so we're excited about that. But so my board has forecasted $5 billion over the next 20 years, additional money that it can allocate to projects. And so looks like what that's going to do is to build some big projects that otherwise might never have gotten built.
Good question. Haley.
A few of you throughout the presentations, but I'm just going to direct it to this panel, have talked about competition between some of the cities. Oh, my highways can, take more passengers than yours, or we have more congestion, or especially with the ports. There's a lot of thinking of this competition between ports, but how can we plan specifically for ports, but also for other infrastructure at the MPO level in a way that's coordinated and builds off each other's assets?
Well, as in Florida, as a mega region, there were 9 areas identified. They were identified for exactly this, what's needed. How do we open new frontiers from the rural areas can be connected to the others? And what is it that they have that the others don't have? And I'm telling you right now what it is. It's right away and very cheap. So, how, and because of Florida being a peninsula, a lot of activity happens along the coast. So the central area is pretty much empty. Don't quote me, but there is a lot of potential in that area for rail facilities, for highway facilities, for high-speed rail. Now, how do we coordinate? There is this statewide system intermodal plan that identifies what's needed. Now, it's not funded, but it's identified. Now, each one of us have done our own plans at the local level, at the regional level. And then again, go to Dr. Rose, there's redundancy. But redundancy has to do with the county, Miami-Dade County has a half penny sales tax for transportation. I know that since 2000, there's only like 2 or 3, penny sales or half penny sales tax passed. So it is not easy. So funding, it is logically a question of how can I make this happen? So now we're entertaining the conversation of P3s who would like to actually participate in helping us do this. So now we're entertaining the conversation at the regional level. Now we also look at what assets they have, and we don't want to compete with each other. We want to sort of complement, even though compete is in the back of your mind anyways. But there is a degree of logic behind it too. Why am I going to build this if they're already at this stage? I've been doing this for 25 years. I have, capture audience right here, an industry already. Well, we think that we'll know it. In 2015, when the first vessels from the post-Panamax arrived, are we prepared? And I don't think we are. Were we over-optimistic? Or what we're doing, assessing each other's assets and try to, see where the void is and where the gaps are and try to fill them, will pay off.
I was just going to add that, and I'm no economist, but it may be that the ports are sort of an exception, sort of a zero-sum game of what's coming in and out of the U.S. So if one gets more, one port gets more, the other gets less. But in general, transportation is not a zero-sum game. If I'm better connected to Washington or Raleigh or Atlanta, then both sides win. Atlanta wins, Raleigh wins, Hampton Roads wins, and Washington wins.
One observation.
In the back, please.
Bill, I have one observation from the California perspective in terms of the gateways. As I mentioned, there are 4 major gateways within California. With the last proposition that provided $2 billion for freight investments, basically within each of those major gateways, the decisions were made regionally. So there wasn't as much competition across the state, but once the funds were divvied up by those key gateways, then each group of MPOs in that region made the decisions for the investments.
In the back, please.
Yes, I'm part of the Terra Incognita south of Virginia.
Maybe just quickly give your
Nick
name.
Tennyson with the NCDOT. So for Mr. Rowland, I'm only partially kidding about this. Have you given any thought to including a per container fee that will help to create a grant fund for those of us that have roads like I-95? We have 185 miles of I-95 that provide excellent service for people that use the port and may actually help you. Is there a fund that we maybe can come up with for cross-border investment in infrastructure?
I won't reply directly to the question, but I can tell you exactly what has come up as an answer. We are actually planning a managed lanes grid for South Florida, tolls everywhere, express lanes everywhere. This is based on a good experience on the I-95 express lanes from between Miami and Broward out of the urban partnership, the U.S. urban partnership. We got funded, and someone else in the United States, gave back their money. They didn't want it, so we got it. So now that turned out to be a good experience. So now we're biting the bullet on, and getting on the papers every day. What is this? There's accidents everywhere the first 2 months. Now we're developing a grid, the first one of the state. Now, what we're trying to do, we do have Expressway 30 in Miami-Dade, trying to capture some of these funds that are on these new express facilities and dedicate some of it to new, not just to maintenance, but to exactly what you're saying. Can we improve these facilities that don't exist right now? The other part of the answer happened, we entertained 5 years ago. We got a private sector. You remember the viaduct I showed you, just for trucks? Well, there is a viaduct that could come from the port to the warehousing district. It will be like 11 miles, very expensive. But we heard the private sector saying, put it on the plan and maybe we can make it happen. Some of this, a project like that has happened. I-595 in Broward County, the county out from us. It is a P3 complete out of a Spanish company built it. Financed it is it's a complete package. They will manage it for 35 years. The first of a state. A mega project done by the private sector. So it's not your answer, but we're looking at all this and examples that we already had. So I guess I can let you know in about 2 years and see what happens.
Catherine.
Okay, so my question is for Rob, and I guess I was wondering about the $5 billion. And tell me, that's a statewide sales tax? Tell me where the revenue stream for that is generated.
I think it's a handful of taxes, but one part of it is, I think, 0.7% sales tax.
Statewide?
No, for the region. For the region.
Okay.
Now, what happened was the statewide, it went from 5% to 5.3%, and I think ours went an additional 0.7%, so we're at 6%. And my board allocates that 0.7%.
Thank you.
We've got time for a couple of more questions, a few more questions. I've got one, and is there an unfair advantage to the MPOs that are in a single state? I mean, we've got 2 MPOs that are in single state megaregions. We have California and we have Florida, at least according to the 10 megaregions. And it seems, and I'm contrasting that to Rob's nice map that has his major road corridor stopping at the border. It seems like the multi-state megaregions are at a real disadvantage compared to the single-state megaregions for bringing together the resources, conducting the plans. Elisa mentioned the flow of Caltrans funds from the STIP to the local areas. How could that ever happen, let's say, in a north of the I-95 corridor where I live in New Hampshire and Maine and Vermont? The idea that Connecticut and Rhode Island and Massachusetts, which are all part of that megaregion, could ever agree on consolidating of funds and prioritizing in the same way that you can in Miami or that you can in San Diego with your other couple of partner agencies. Is that an unfair sort of thing? And are there any federal policy implications for that?
Me? I won't reply to that, but there's too many. This is what I think needs to happen. There is single MPOs in Washington State, Seattle, Chicago, and Illinois. Because of the percentage of the total population of the state, they get a high allocation. I know Atlanta could be another example. Now, and a part of the discussion this morning was, in the presentation, Dr. Ross, that these mega regions, quarter of the population, put out 75% of the GDP. So I believe, I'm going to use the 1 minute left to pledge that the new MAP 22, and you know where it's going, Jane, it should actually look into this population-based, and that, these regions are pretty much moving the United States, and they're just getting a formula that is totally unfair. So that will cover the ones that are fair or unfair. It will just give them fairly to the ones that produce something.
Great answer.
Did anybody else want to comment on that one? Or okay,
Life is not fair.
Yeah, it's a kind of a bit of a trap. Well, I think we're right on time for everyone to have a full break, but first I'd like to thank our excellent panel and also give the audience, give yourself a hand for great discussion.